The second, Eileen, which is the new psychological thriller that author Ortessa Mosfe adapted from a 2015 novel with husband William Oldroyd directing, begins. It immediately feels like a movie made in 1988 with how it's shot and with very old school title graphics, which kind of indicate a bit of a horror movie element to it, which again does pay off and make more sense as you get to the end. Thomasin McKenzie continues her rise in the titular role as Eileen, who's a bit of a wallflower living in a difficult home with an alcoholic ex-cop father who's played by the excellent Shea Wingham. The mundanity of her existence working in a prison in 1960s New England leaves her kind of bubbling at the surface, which is until the arrival of new psychologist Rebecca, who's played by Anne Hathaway, as a much needed kind of role model for her. And that unlocks the side of Eileen that she didn't even realize existed. It's a small and really granular movie, and much of the plot plays out very much on the face and within the daydreams of the fantastic Mackenzie, which, by the way, the daydreams can be quite graphic and upsetting at times. And I put a trigger warning here for anyone who's sensitive to graphic depictions of suicide. While we're in tune with absolutely every thought in Eileen's head, Hathaway is much more elusive and enigmatic as Rebecca. A key scene that kind of illustrates this is where the two of them are dancing in a bar, and this illustrates kind of the difference perfectly. Whereas the camera goes in very close on Mackenzie's face, and we see what Eileen's going through in that dance, but we only see the back of Hathaway's head, so we've no idea how she's feeling about it. What I really liked about this, though, is that if you were to put the plot on paper, and if just explaining that to you, it's like someone's in a mundane existence and then they meet someone who's going to be a role model and they show them a whole new way of life. It sounds really kind of hopeful and optimistic and pleasant and nice. But what I liked about it was that it's not the movie experience. Instead, there's this kind of overwhelming sense of dread constantly throughout that envelops everything that's going on and suggests you're actually heading somewhere quite dark, which you are, trust me. The end of the second act, I'm not going to get into it or indicate in any way, but it takes a really, really hard left turn out of the blue, and the movie then quickly becomes something different. And again, that's kind of inspiring. There's a lot of tepid reviews for this, and I understand it, and it's not going to be for everyone. It might not be for you. But if you like hard, dramatic twists, and I do personally, this probably will be for you. And I immediately sat up and was watching on the edge of my seat. But also, it might not be for some because, like, again, it might feel to some like it turns into a completely different movie. And one person, for example, left the screening that I was in early. I personally do feel that it was able to be justified, and they left the building blocks there to justify the twist and make it make sense. Like, it's not From Dusk Till Dawn, which again starts as a kind of crime caper and then becomes a vampire movie without any warning or any explanation or anything to do with it. It just happens. That's not what we're dealing with here, but it can be jarring and may not be for everyone, particularly as it gets into quite dark territory and a really upsetting subject matter around abuse that make it really uncomfortable for some to sit through in a cinema surrounded by others. Again, if it's something that makes you kind of upset or angry or anything like that, I'd say avoid this movie. This was up my alley, though. I like ballsy filmmaking where people are swinging and trying things, even if all of it doesn't pay off. I'm okay with heavy subject matters being used for plot points, and I think the writing is strong enough that doesn't just use them to be shocking, and the performances carried the weight of it too. It was interesting with a lot to say, and it felt authentic, credible, and respectful at the same time. It is very intense, though. It's gripping on one hand, but also really uncomfortable on the other. So it may not be for you. And if you're thinking it's not, maybe just leave it. But if you're like me and you appreciate films that kind of push you and go all the way up to the line just to see what happens, there is a lot to like about Eileen, and I recommend you go see it. It's in cinemas now.